Hello, this is Kimberly Wilson, and welcome to the 466th edition of Tranquility du Jour. Today I'm chatting with Britt Bravo, who's a returning guest, and we're talking change, creating the big vision for ourselves, and connection. I also love this. She chats about the 4 things plants, yes, plants, can teach us about change. Now, for those of you new to Tranquility du Jour, there's a link in the show notes that can be found at kimberlywilson.com/466, and you'll find a link to find out a bit more about Tranquility du Jour, and also sign up for Love Notes, where you will get exclusive content, personal updates, giveaways, and access to Tranquil Treasures. Again, all of this can be found at kimberlywilson.com/466. Also, if you have a moment to share a review of this podcast over on iTunes or any of my work on Amazon, you may just hear it shared here on the show. And I really appreciate it whenever you take the time to do that. So big thank you to those who have done it over the years, because if you can believe it, this is our 14th year. We are turning 14. Been bringing tranquility since 2005 through this medium. And as you know, Tranquility du Jour, it's a series of nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with tranquility. And so the latest review that I wanted to share was from Maureen. And this is actually about Year of Tranquility, the book released in January. And she says this lifestyle planner is inspiring, easy to use, and adorable. For years, I've been anti-planner because I hadn't really found anything that really suited me until now. It has a great layout, is eye-catching, easy to use, and fun. Thank you so much, Maureen, for sharing this over on Amazon. Also, visit kimberlywilson.com/podcast for more episodes. There's many more, 465 more, and of course the app. And subscribe in your favorite podcast app, such as Apple Podcast or Overcast, and then you'll be sure to never miss an episode of Tranquility du Jour. And as I mentioned in my last podcast, I'll be doing kind of flip-flopping, 1 week Tea with Kimberly video, 1 week podcast. And so we'll get on that schedule this fall. But for now, I just released the latest Tea with Kimberly video, which is it was recorded actually in the Paris apartment right before I headed to Charles de Gaulle to head back to DC just about a week and a half ago. And I talk about my 4 tips for planning your next adventure. And so I hope that's helpful. And I, of course, will have a link to that also in the show notes. For those of you who live in Canada, I'm going to be there this weekend teaching yoga, business, and mindfulness workshops. Would love to have you join us, and that's at Luna Yoga, and you can find more about that also in the show notes. And so excited to share that the 4-week, my brand new Tranquility Salon online launches on September 27th, and registration has just opened over this past week. And we're going to be deep diving into 4 topics: mindfulness, creativity, self-care, and dreams/goals. We're going to have a live kickoff that starts on September 27th. Then you're going to get videos and audio into your inbox once a week. You're going to have a private page with tons of bonuses and resources. And then we'll do a live wrap-up on October 25th. So I hope you can join us for this. This is the first time I've offered it. And I'm really excited about it because I've been doing these in my Washington, D.C. office for the past year, but I wanted to take it to those of you who don't live in D.C. And for those of you who do live in D.C., we are launching our 4-week in-person one September 29th, and I have 1 spot left if you'd like to join. Also, a few more things that are coming up is Pugs and Pints, which is our nonprofit. We have an event happening October 27th, and of course, it's right around Halloween, so costumes are welcome. And all the proceeds benefit a pug rescue, and a pig sanctuary. And that's to be determined based on need right around the time of the event. And of course, we always announce it and share how much we raised. And it's really exciting. And we so appreciate your support. And of course, there's some things happening around New Year's. As always, I'm doing a mini retreat at YogaWorks Dupont on New Year's Eve, and then a New Year's salon in my office on January 1st. And there are only 6 spots left for that. So if you're interested, there's a link in the show notes. Now, without further ado, our beautiful featured guest, Britt Bravo. She guides creative entrepreneurs, writers, artists, and healers to clarify, create, and communicate their big vision for their work in the world. Practical and intuitive, she has worked in the personal growth and social change sector for almost 30 years. So learn more about the lovely Britt over in the show notes and visit her at brittbravo.com. Welcome, Britt.
Hi, Kimberly.
Hello. What a treat to have you on the show. Is this like your 50th time?
I think so, which is appropriate because my 50th birthday is coming up. So it's a great synchronicity.
Oh my gosh. So yes. And I know when your birthday is, and that is your 50.
It is coming up around the corner.
Wow. That's exciting. Do you have any big plans?
Yes, I am. I live in the Bay Area, and in June, they opened something called the SF Crosstown Trail, which is a 17-mile hike through the urban wilderness of San Francisco, the city of San Francisco. And so I am doing that in 2 parts with 2 different sets of friends, and I'm really excited.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I love active birthdays.
Yeah. I just thought, had to do something a little different and special for a big birthday. And so that's what I came up on.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being back with us here on Tranquility du Jour. And, my first question for you is from a recent blog post, which I just love because plants are the new hip thing, which I also love. And, one of the things that you wrote the whole post about is what plants can teach us about change, which I thought was so good. And I've always kind of been a proponent of like the idea of repotting your plants and recognizing when the plants have outgrown their pots and you've outgrown your own sorts of pots. So I just love this. So can you tell us what are the 4 things you think that plants can teach us about change?
Absolutely. And I am a very newbie gardener. And so I think that's how this post came to be as I was learning these different things about how to take care of plants and grow plants. I was like, oh, this applies to my work with people. So, and also I think this time in history just feels very change filled and uncertain to people. And so that's also why I wrote it, because I thought everyone's probably feeling very unsettled and like either there's a lot of change they want to make or there's a lot of change that's just happening. And so that's sort of was why I had that framework. So the 4 things that so far, and I'm sure there's more to learn that I've learned from plants is 1, to release what you no longer need. And that came from, I have this big geranium plant and it had all these dead flowers on it. And I hadn't done that before. And so I asked a friend who's a more experienced gardener, what should I do? And she said, oh, well, that's where deadheading comes from. You have to take the dead flowers off of all of your plants so that otherwise the plant thinks like we're done here. But if you don't take those dead parts off, it won't continue to grow. So, in that same way, when we are feeling like we need to change, but it's not happening or we're not sure what to do, like getting rid of the old stuff, the things that are dead, per se, in our life, in our big vision for our work in the world, can then make room for new things to grow. And then just like you said, making space for growth, that came from, I'm trying to grow a tomato plant. And the person who sold me the pot sold me this really small pot, and the tomato plant's doing really well, and it's getting really big. And then it started to kind of fail. And so I went back into the garden store again, and they said, oh no, you need a much bigger pot. And so, there are also times in the contrast of things we need to let go of that are kind of fading away or metaphorically dead. There are times when we have to make space, exactly like repotting, like we need more space to grow. We need to be more open to opportunities. We need to change either our physical space or the amount of time we give to something, or it could be an emotional way of giving space to let what we want to do grow. And then being patient. So yes, you can water, you can have the right pot, you can add plant food, but you can't forced. You can't say, grow faster. I stare at this tomato plant like, give me the tomatoes faster. And you have to be patient. And everything has its own time. Some things grow really quickly. Some things grow really slowly. Some things are medium. And it makes me think of, I used to work in elementary education and arts education. And I used to go visiting and do storytelling and writing in schools. And there was a teacher. She'd been a teacher for like 40 years. And I was a partner with someone, and we asked her, a co-teacher with someone, and we said, like, how did you do this? How have you been teaching for 40 years? And she taught in very challenging schools. And she said, well, I just know that I plant the seed, and I don't hold on to that I have to see results in my school year. She said, sometimes, the kids sprout per se right away. Sometimes they're still in the school and I see them sprouting. This was a middle school. Maybe I get them in 7th grade. I see them sprouting in 9th grade. And then maybe I'll never see it. But how do I know that what I didn't plant, won't sprout and blossom when they're an adult? So in that way, you have to be patient with the things that you plant. And then finally, you have to have faith in your resilience. Change, I think human beings both naturally change and naturally don't want to change. And especially, a lot of times we have changes that we don't want, or they seem really hard. And we think, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this change. This is so hard. And that's the other thing I've learned from plants is, they can be extremely resilient. And if you have to move them, or, I'm in California, maybe we get too much rain or too much sun. And there's been times I thought, oh, that's it. Or I've had, a plant looks like, oh, it's looking kind of diseased, and you cut it all the way back and you think, well, that's it for that plant. And then boop, it comes back. So it's also believing in our own resiliency amidst change.
Beautiful. Thank you. I mean, there are so many lessons from plants, and I do just adore that they're kind of the new cool thing. Like, we have plant shops in DC that I've never seen before that are really just darling. And even I went into anthropology recently, and there was a whole kind of plant area that's actually another business that's within anthropology. I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that too. There's something, I feel like when you see those trends, obviously there are trends that are done by market research, but I also feel like, where do they come from? And I think that there is something going on, at least in the States, of, that desire to grow natural things, to be involved in that natural growing process, because a lot of our life is becoming, less natural.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do think, for a while, right, it was like knitting or, making your own, jam or, things like that, like a lot of DIY-y stuff. And so it is interesting to watch the evolutions and it coming back to this, like, getting your hands dirty sort of stuff.
Absolutely. And I think there is something we don't use the word grounding. We use it for a reason, right? And that this is a time in history that's very you can feel very ungrounded. And so to, be involved with plants and have your hands in the dirt and to literally be grounded in the ground, I think is very therapeutic for people.
Absolutely. And, one of the pieces that's a big part of you and your work is a big vision, having a big vision. So can you tell us a little bit about how you define it? What is a big vision and how do we find our own?
Well, do you know, no one has ever asked me that question.
Really?
In all my years, no one has said, exactly what do you mean by that? So I was like, what a great question. Let me tell you. So to me, what a big vision means is it is an idea that you have that, first of all, feels so big that in some ways you just think, I don't know if I could do that, right? And it's so big. The word that comes to mind to me is it's transformative. It's an idea, and it can be for a business, a product, a service, an organization. And it's something that will transform something, transform the way we do things, transform a person's life, transform a community, transform a system, a belief. And because it's big, then sometimes we need help making it happen. It's hard to make very big things happen all by yourself. So in terms of, but how to find it, usually it's the thing that lights you up. It's the thing that you can't stop thinking about. It's the thing that you have these little inklings and synchronicities that happen. Sometimes it turns out it's the thing that you look back in your life and there's a thread that's kind of led you to that point. And because it's big and because it's often, it both feels familiar and unfamiliar, feels attainable, like you can see it, but not attainable because you're not exactly sure the path to get you there. Some of the things that can help you realize your big vision, and this is certainly not all of them, but when you're hitting snags and challenges, one is that we can become like plans and strategies and to-do lists and tools and trainings and all those things. Those are all super important, to get you there. But sometimes we have, internal stuff that stops us from reaching our big vision. Things that, you would know from the therapy world, they call your shadow. And all your shadow is the parts of our personality that we're not wild about. And so we put them in the shadows so that hopefully we and nobody else has to see them. So one of the things you kind of have to do if you're struggling on your way to your big vision is kind of look at those things and say, maybe my, insecurity or lack of confidence or my anger or, things like that we're like, I don't want anybody to know I'm like that. Maybe those are some of the things that are sort of slowing me down. And then after you look at them, to be really compassionate with yourself about them, because I think sometimes people just get stuck in that way. They say, I really want this thing. I have this big vision. I know it's important. I'm really passionate about it, but I can't get there. And, I've kind of realized it's this quality or this thing that's going on for me that's kind of making me struggle to get there. And then they just feel badly and they give up. But that is not what you should do. Instead, you really need to be compassionate with yourself. Everybody has stuff, internal stuff that, slows them down. And there's a wonderful book, which I'm sure many of your listeners have read, which is by Kristen Neff about self-compassion. And I can't recommend it more highly. And that really, it's such an important component. And she talks about it in the book that self-compassion, we think that we are more easily motivated when we are strict and mean in a way, or harsh, or, kind of like an army sergeant with ourselves. But actually people who are self-compassionate, who are nurturing to themselves, who, what I like to call like a nurturing inner manager. Like think of a project manager or a boss. Think of all the qualities of a boss that you wouldn't want to have, right? Don't be that boss to yourself. Be a nurturing inner manager to yourself. Be the inner manager who takes care of your well-being, who nurtures your skills, who gets you training to develop them more, who make sure you get the support you need. So all those to me are folded into self-compassion. So being self-compassionate with yourself, treating being like your best inner nurturing manager, and then getting support, because you really can't do it all by yourself. And yes, you can, hire a coach or something like that, or you can take a class or be a part of group coaching, or if it's really deep stuff, go to a therapist. But you also can have support by doing things like just starting a group of people who are trying to do work like you, big visionaries like you, and meeting every month, and whether it's by Zoom or phone or in person, and sharing your big vision, sharing the steps you want to take, celebrating your successes, helping each other brainstorm the challenges that you face. You could do co-working, whether it's going to a co-working space, or same thing, doing it with some friends at a cafe or somebody's house. Also, there's like Meetup and Eventbrite, and there's, different groups there that you can connect with people who are like you. So those are a few things.
Yeah. Well, one of the pieces too about Krista Neff that I like, I did just a 2-day training with her a couple years ago. And, one of the things that really stuck out with me is she says to treat yourself as you would a dear friend. And then I've also read or heard her say, treat yourself as you would a child with the flu. Right. So it's
Aw.
like super tender, which I just love that. So yeah, listeners, definitely check out Krista Neff, and I'll put a link to her website in the show notes because she's got practices and all sorts of resources. She's really, really great.
She really is.
And TED Talks too, I think.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about connection and kind of the benefits of it. So, one of the things right now through social media and what have you is we have all these connections, right? And yet the data is showing that we actually feel more lonely than we ever have. So can you speak a little bit to why connection is so important?
Absolutely. And excuse me, people can have big visions and work in organizations. People can have big visions and work for themselves. A lot of the people I work with work for themselves, and they're very, very isolated. But you could also feel isolated within a big organization and have a big vision. So it applies to both. The reason connection is so important, first and fundamentally, just like you said, the data, the research shows that not only are we feeling more lonely and less connected, and that's, I think one of the contributing factors of, like, we see all these things about rising anxiety and depression for people. It's feeling disconnected and lonely is really not good for your physical or mental well-being, just period. It's not good for you. And if you are not physically and mentally and emotionally well, you're not going to have the energy, the time, the wherewithal to make your big vision happen. And our world needs your big vision. So that's the first part. It's just humans are not supposed to spend so much time alone, so much time feeling disconnected from others. So that's the most fundamental reason. Then in a more practical way, when you've got an idea for something, if you are connecting with other people who want to try to do similar things, or just kind of all working together to support each other's big vision, you can knowledge share. So for example, there was a period of time where I was co-working with 3 other women who all had their own businesses, and we would do that once a week at someone's house. And there was just, even small things like, what's the best email newsletter program? Have you used this tool? How do you do that? How do you get people to show up for your workshop? Stuff like that. So you can do that through classes, but you can also just do that through peer knowledge sharing. And why reinvent the wheel? I mean, every person I work with talks about how they don't have enough time. So it can be very time saving to connect with other people and share knowledge. You can also share resources, like actual physical resources, depending on whether they're books or, oh, I'm doing a podcast, you have a microphone I can borrow, or things like that. So that can be money saving. And also it's great for networking. And as we know, like, so many referrals, connections, jobs, opportunities come through word of mouth. We are people humans make decisions based a lot of times based on emotions, on recommendations of people we trust through word of mouth. I mean, why do we have reviews on everything now, right? Between Yelp and Amazon and things like that. It's because that's one of the things we use to make a decision about how we're going to invest our time, our money, what kind of connections we're going to make. So the more connection you can make, whether it's through, co-working or getting together with people who are doing similar work or going to events, the more likely that you will make connections that could potentially take you to next steps and places that you wanted to go. And then finally, not finally, I've got a lot. I always have a lot. But so a few more are, so there's, collaboration, because often if you have a big vision, there's a lot of parts, and we were not built to know how to do everything or have every talent or have every skill. And when you can collaborate with people, they often can bring complementary skills, which will potentially have your project or idea have a bigger impact. Also, it can be great for accountability, especially if you work for yourself or you're working on this big vision project for yourself, to have someone or a group of people that you say, I am going to work on my book today, or I am going to go to the studio and do my art, or I am going to write a grant for this project, or I am going to get this new website up. And if you have no one to tell, and sometimes those things just kind of get pushed to the bottom of the priority list. But if you are telling someone else, that often can help you, and they are being nurturing in their encouragement, that can help you, that accountability to make steps towards that. It's also good for a reality check. Sometimes big visions can be a little out there, and we have an idea like, this is what I think we need. And so when you connect, and if you're spending all your time alone and you're on the computer and you're just kind of in your world of like, these are my ideas and this is what I think and this is what I think we need, you don't have any reality check of like, do they really need that? Is that how you should be doing that? So connecting with other people and telling them about your ideas and having them, try stuff out for you can be great for a learning experience and give you a reality check about, the viability of your idea or what you might need to tweak. So once again, and the last one I would say, once again, comes back to compassion. So I used to have a group of women I used to meet with. There were about 4 or 6 of us. We were all had our own big visions, and we would come together, talk about our goals, what we wanted to do, our successes, our challenges. And when you heard each person's journey, and it went on for something like 10 years. And so when you really followed other people's journeys, the ups and downs, the challenges, the successes, the failures, it does help you have compassion for yourself, because these are, just like you were saying when Kristen Neff said, have compassion for your dearest friend. When you are with that group, you have compassion for these people that you care with. You don't think, oh, you're so dumb, why did that happen? You just think, oh, I'm so sorry that happened. Oh, how can we figure out, a way to make that better? And it can help you to feel the same way for yourself, to realize, that's just the way it is. There's going to be bumps on the road, and it's all about how you kind of pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and continue on. So those are some of the many good reasons to make connection a priority on your path to your big vision.
Absolutely. Well, and you've mentioned a few ideas definitely on how to increase our connection, but is there anything else that comes to mind to you or that you found helpful besides, definitely the accountability, like getting together and co-working, and you mentioned meetup? Because I will say, I hear this from so many people that after college, it's like, where do you meet people? Okay, at work, some people. And yet, what about people who work solo or work from home a lot? It can be quite isolating.
Absolutely. So I think that, those 2 examples I mentioned, one of the group that we got together just to share, it would be on a Sunday night at like a local cafe restaurant once a month to share our big visions and how that was going. That was wonderful and worked really well. That was actually a time that worked well for people with families. Then there was the group that we did the in-person co-working once a week, and that was during work hours. And so that had a very specific feel to it, which was, more work oriented. We're here just kind of being together as we get work done. And then we have, someone to look up and say a little something to and have lunch. So it was less, processy and what am I doing? The last thing that I have found that has been very helpful is actually virtual co-working. And so there's a friend who is an editor, and we do it all virtually. So it's kind of like having it's like office sharing, I would almost say. And so get up in the morning. Okay, I'll meet you on Zoom at 8. Okay, what are you doing today? What am I doing today? Okay, great. And then we'll log off, and then we'll say, we'll get back on in 3 hours. I'll have lunch with you, or have a snack with you and tell you how it's going. Okay, now I'll see you in another hour or 2 hours. So that's something else. And then finally, I would add, I have noticed that because we have so many amazing things on the computer and online and Netflix and social media and so on and so forth. And, I'm kind of this funny middle, as I've said, 50 middle age, the bridge between, before we had so much technology and what we have now. And to say yes when people ask you to do things outside of your house. And I know that sounds crazy, but I recently went to like a national night out in my neighborhood, and almost everybody there had gray or white hair. And I thought, I know that there are young people in this neighborhood. Why are they not at this? And I just think that we, as a culture, sometimes don't appreciate the small moments of human connection that maybe have no purpose, right? It's all these things I've described have a purpose, like for my work purpose, but this didn't have a purpose. It was just to get to know your neighbors and bring something to share. So to also look for those kinds of moments of connection that are just purely to be with people, and they don't have to have like a goal in mind.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great reminder. And I think too, the kind of other side of the coin is just a reminder also for those who are more introverted and need a lot of replenishing time after being with others, which could be, simply being at work or being at home with your kids or your partner, to recognize too, like, okay, you got to find that balance. And while others may need a lot more connection, you may also need not just connection with others, but some pretty quiet solo time also.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. I mean, obviously, different people have different levels of extroversion and introversion and what energizes them. But I do think whether you're an introvert or extrovert, our culture has become more stay at home behind the scenes in front of a screen. And that I still believe introverts could still. And I am technically an introvert. I'm what are those things? INFJ. I still think we need to get out there more.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is. I think you're so right. Cause we can stay at home behind behind a screen and be like, I'm so connected, and it's not the same. It's not the same.
Exactly.
So my last question for you, Britt, is around the name of this podcast, Tranquility du Jour. And I always like to ask people, how do you find tranquility in your everyday?
Well, let's see. I'm a big morning routine person. So part of how I find tranquility in my everyday is doing different morning practices. Some are consistent and some change with time. Most of the time it involves some kind of meditation, a little bit of pranayama, my own yoga home practice, sometimes some journaling. And then whether it's in the morning or in the evening, I kind of like it either way, like first thing or at the end of the day when the sun sets, to go for a walk, like a long walk. And I'm lucky that in my neighborhood, I live near a cemetery, which may sound really strange, but it's actually extremely beautiful and large. And when you climb up to the top of one of the hills, you can see an incredible view I'm in the East Bay, so you can see San Francisco and the bay and the mountains. And it's, there's some animals in there and birds. And it's not exactly like going to the forest, but it's pretty good for nature in an urban environment. And that in particular, I think, gives me the greatest tranquility. There's something about walking with the motion, the being in motion, but in a grounded motion, being surrounded by beauty and nature, and then that view just never, there's something awe-inspiring about that view, and to be able to look at that view. And it just, it re-energizes you, or at least me, and taps me back into, oh yeah, everything's going to be okay. Look at that. There is, in the challenges of our life, there's always little bits of beauty. And that often comes in nature. So I would say those are some of the main things that bring me tranquility.
Love it. Right. And the whole thing with nature and like the forest bathing and, I just love it. I think kind of like plants, it's like people are getting more mindful about having this connection to the physical world and how powerful it can be versus, sitting behind a screen.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
Well, thank you so much, Britt, as always, for being here with us and for sharing your wisdom and for all the goodness you put out into the world.
Oh, thanks, Kimberly. And thank you so much. I'm so honored to be on the podcast again. And yes, thank you.
Savvy Sources. You can find Britt on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And then, of course, on her website, brittbravo.com. And there are links to all of this in the show notes, kimberlywilson.com/466. Also mentioned in the podcast, I have a link to Mindful Self-Compassion and the latest Tea with Kimberly video, and then also links to my former interviews with the lovely Britt. Takeaways, please share any that you might have using hashtag TDJ Podcast. I love hearing your takeaways or seeing your takeaways, maybe taking a screenshot, listening to the show, post it and tag me at Tranquility du Jour or hashtag TDJ Podcast. Again, I really appreciate it. I love seeing who is listening and from where and what are you doing when you're listening. And again, if you have a moment to share a review on iTunes or Amazon, really would appreciate that. And you'll also find links in the show notes to my latest books, Year of Tranquility, the Tranquility du Jour Daybook, my Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube accounts, along with a link to Tranquility, my locally sewn, eco-friendly fashion line. And our fall collection is out and it's fabulous. And there is a video that you can find over at tranquility.com that'll show you what's going on there. And also read about my passion for animals. It's a really big piece of kind of what shapes my work and my life, and would love to hear your feedback and your stories on your passion for animals. And wishing you a wonderful week ahead. Thank you again so much for joining, for being with us. Happy podiversary to Tranquility du Jour, 14 years. And thanks so much to many of you who have been with me since the beginning. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Namaste.